Hey, um, I'm I'm trying something new this time. I've got the microphone. I'm actually holding the microphone up, talking into it. My arms are probably gonna get tired doing this. I wish I had like a microphone arm, something that I could angle in front of my face, but at the same time I do kind of like holding the microphone up, talking into it. I just it feels natural this way. It feels like the way that microphones were intended to be used, and yeah. So I'm extremely tired. I played The Sims today. I haven't touched my guitar, so I'm gonna do that after I record this episode. But um, yeah, I've got spring break coming up here soon, and I'm pretty damn excited. But I've got some good news. I don't have much in the way of bad news. I do have some things I'd like to talk about. I would like to make a preface forward here. Um, you know, I try not to make a big deal out of my points. Of course, I state my points, but I don't want my opinions to be the catch all be all. And I'd like to say that this doesn't matter. This podcast doesn't really matter. Although I love it and I'm going to continue to do it, and that it's very important to me. It doesn't matter, right? So what do I mean by that? Um, I guess another forward is I watched uh I watched Fences yesterday for the first time, and um, I'm in a really immature period of my life right now. Right. I think a lot of people that are in the privileged position that I'm in. I don't mean that in a racial way. But I mean I'm in a really good position, especially from a lineage, or at least on my mother's side of family, like family that wasn't really ever predominantly higher class, right? So I'm in a very privileged position here where you know, I can I can go to college and I don't really have to work. I can do the things I like to do, right? And my idea of self and my self-preservation they can prevail at the current moment because of the situation. Um some of it comes from cooperation, the things around me, they have some of those things have fallen into my lap. Um, I haven't particularly asked for a situation to be leased to me, something particularly great or extraordinary. I'm not in the best position in the world. I know that things could hypothetically be going better, but things are far from bad right now, right? But I'm in a really great position right now where I don't have to go out and work 40 hours a week while trying to support a college lifestyle, right? I don't have to pay for the house I live in. I pay rent, but I don't have to necessarily pay for the house I live in, right? I can afford things like movies. I can afford things like video games. I can support all those things that are completely arbitrary to me. And, that being said, those things don't matter, right? It's important to take care of yourself. You have to be alive, but you also have to live, right? You have to survive, but you also have to live. But so I'm really fortunate that after this long line of families who don't really have very much, you know, and a lot of families in today in the area I live, and in like American society right now, there's a lot of families that don't have anything, right? So I am a commuter. I do live at home, right? I live at home and I get to go to college and I get to do the things I like, and I still am stressed, right? But I mean, I'm in a position where like I get to be happy and stay happy, and it's very rare, right? In high school, I wasn't that, because I worked at Little Caesars and I liked my job there, right? But while I was in high school, um, I was trying to balance so much, trying to balance toxic friendships, toxic relationships, a toxic work environment a lot of the time. Even though I did like my job, it was a really toxic, immature environment for me to be in, and it my work environment really stunted my emotional growth in a lot of ways, because instead of natural conflict resolution and um an actual formal, well put together management system, what had arisen from the the social the social environment at Little Caesars there, what had arisen was this complex of conflicts, right? Where it was really immature. People would hold things over each other's heads, and they would, try to get a leg up or try to throw someone under the bus, and that's not how work should be. But now I'm not working. I mean, I still have I all the money I have is mine, until I have to pay it back. So I mean, there is that, right? And I'm able to save money. I'm really happy. I'm saving money right now, and I'm trying to use my money wiser. I'm not using it as wise as I could be, but I'm using it wiser than I was, and I'm really thankful for that. I have a really good supporting cast when it comes to university. Not just my parents, but the university staff are amazing. All the professors, I think they like me. I think a lot of them, see that I'm not a guy trying to be smart. I'm not a guy trying to be a super inflated ego, trying to uplift himself and try to be the smartest person in the room or in the world. I think they see what I actually want to be. I want to be well versed in the things I like. And I was watching a Kevin Smith interview today, and he put it best. Like, you guys hear the shit I like. You guys don't hear the shit I don't like. Except for I think I talked about it last video, but outside of like some Camaro models or some builds, or some hypercar builds, like Koenigsegg. I don't really know much about cars. I I mean, on a medical level, I know stuff involving cells and whatnot, but when it comes to actually like biology itself, I have a lot of work I need to do. Things like genetics and whatnot, things I do like, but I'm not super well versed in. You guys don't hear about that, and so you guys aren't here to witness the struggle. For the most part, you guys. I've started taking up learning Romanian, because my geology professor is Romanian, and he's a really cool guy, and I have some degree of efficiency in the other major Romance languages, Italian, Spanish, French, Portuguese, French is getting there. It just takes work, takes time, it's dedication. But yeah, so I mean, I'm learning Romanian, and there's a lot of things I'm struggling with. It's a case language, so there's things like that. But I mean, you guys don't hear that, and I mean that's why I say that the podcast isn't important, because you guys get to hear the non-struggle parts, the parts I'm enthusiastic about, and even though I stumble or I stammer or I accidentally say something wrong here or there, like not intentionally trying to spread information, but just naturally being confused with those cognitive errors, or false associations, metonymity, sometimes gets in the way. But you guys get to hear the enthusiastic part. It's not the frustration of me meddling over the pronunciation of a word, or me being frustrated that I don't remember what the word besondas means, right? That it means especially, but yeah, there are words like that I forget all the time, and those are the things in the background I don't like talking about, because it makes me. I mean, I can talk about it here and now, because I understand now that it comes with the work, that you don't do things right, I talked to my French professor. He's a really great guy. Him and I were talking. He said you don't get it right the first, one, two, or first, second, even 10th time, right? So I can be in the lane of saying a word right, but you know, it's gonna take you hundreds of hours to do things the way you want to. And when people talk about learning a language to fluency, it's you know, mostly conversation, but there are things I want to do. I want to be able to understand a lot of the more technical vocabulary in a lot of languages, which is a very large challenge, you know, because I'm familiar with so many concepts. Maybe not a complete or not maybe, definitely not a complete understanding of things, but you know, talking about how particles move across the cytoplasm, learning how to talk about those things in German is an extreme task. Learning to talk about those things in your native language is an extreme task as well. You know, like if I sit here and told you about history, so like Geschichte, so there's history, but then you go further and further down the line, so there's history, there's geologic history, which I could be geologische, so geologische Geschichte, or maybe one word, geologische Geschichte. So there's geologic history, and then there's just Geschichte in general, with like history as we know it, like human history and what happens over the course of humanity. But then you have to associate what is known, and you have to be able to defend what you say. So if let me think of something real quick. So if you say something, make a claim, you have to be able to defend it from a series of angles, and here comes the real sociology aspect of it, or maybe not sociology, but actually talking to people, like communicating. So you get a standard question: Warum lernst du Deutsch? So why do you learn German? So there's a why question in there. So ich habe Interesse an Deutsche, yeah, or an Deutsche, or ans Deutsche, right? So I'm interested in German. So ich interessiere Deutsche, right? So ich praktiziere vielen, und ich schreiben und ich gehören Deutsche. So I write, I listen German. Ich aufzeichne videos in Deutsche. So I record videos in German, and my German's not perfect. So I mean, I could have got the grammar wrong, but so those are ways I defend, right? But so but there's also the angle where it's like, are you going to use this? Willst du benutzen Deutsche ins Futur? So will you use German in the future? Well, my English logic here is that, while I may not ever live in Germany, or there's a good chance I'll go to Germany or Austria, or a country that speaks German, right? Well, there's a good chance. There's also a chance that I might not, right? It's not 50-50, realistically. As of right now, I have no chance of going to Germany, as of right now. But I know in the future opportunities will open up, right? So it's never really just 50-50. It's not that black and white. So that frame of logic would need to get translated, right? the frame of logic that I learned it because I like the language and I like the culture. Well, I mean, you need to learn to defend that. So that's the communications aspect. And as as I've distanced myself from the communication aspect of language, um you know, I'm really enamored with reading and I'm really enamored with writing. And you know, I really admire comparative literature and I like reading. And like a lot of the languages I read, I perfectly understand them, or not perfectly, but I mostly understand them, and I have an intellectual grasp on what a lot of texts mean and what a lot of texts say. And if I get a master's in translation, language competency courses, when it comes to translation, hey, I mean, those are based on that according to the classics professor that is at the university I have. He says those language competency courses, they give you a complicated text and you need to be able to break things down and understand why. So, um so the Austrian concept of like it's something that happened in school. So it's das nationalistische Studentenverbindung, right? So the verbinding, the binding would be like putting two things together. So like it's binded together, right? So the Verbindung is the active binding of something together. So Studentenverbindung would be like the binding of students to something. So nationalistische would be like the binding of students to their nation, right? Now, depending on the concept, I think that's what it's called, the nationalistische Studentenverbindung. I think that's what it's called. I could be wrong, but yeah. So those sorts of concepts, you would have to break it down like I did there. Of course, that was a really short, abbreviated understanding of a word as I know it, and you know, uh, so you could take any. It's hard to think of words you don't know. Like yeah, I can do it with some words, like a lot of words that. So I had problems remembering what the word Erzählung, because the word Zählung means count, but Erzählung is like the recounting, so story. But I hadn't thought of it like that while I was having a conversation with German, or a conversation in German with this gentleman who had studied in the Goethe Institute in India, and he kept saying that word, and um it doesn't always occur to me to ask, right? So I never once asked. I was like, was bedeutet Erzählung, was bedeutet Wort Erzählung, right? I never asked him that, right? Mostly because I didn't want to humiliate myself not knowing a word that I should have known. And we were having a good conversation. It wasn't really pertinent. It wasn't like this big important word I was forgetting. It was just I kind of knew what it meant. I kind of didn't know what it meant, but you know, like I didn't really have time to sit there and think and process this word because it was a conversation. I had to denote everything that was said. So there's that. And um I mean a lot of that happens, as it stands now, as I get more used to the sharpness of the language and how it's actually spoken, which I've gotten a lot better at. I'll feel more confident and I won't be as forgetful, which is always a plus. And he said, dass ich muss gehen zu Deutschland. So, over Sommer, Sommerzeit, over den Sommerzeit, over den Sommerzeit. Ich würde gehen zu Deutschland oder Österreich. Da ist Studenten, da sind Studenten in meiner Universität, das kommen vom Halbon. Ich glaube das. ist der Name? So yeah, there's always that. Excuse me, enjoying Coca-Cola today. Who would have thought, right? Evan and Coca-Cola, not ever. But yeah, I kind of created a mixed match of coral snake pattern here. Going through the point, sewing through the point, right? In 20 years, and when I die, there's going to be a group of people standing around in a room assessing my life, figuring out what to say about me. And I don't particularly know if I like the story I have of myself right now. I don't think I've lived up to a lot. I don't think anything I've done is really that important. I think I have things that make me happy, but think that I don't think I've done anything worthy yet, right? I don't think I've done anything worth doing. And no one says you have to do that, within your 20s or your 30s. People get to their 40s that start doing, but some people have these elongated periods of just continuous growth and they're just prosperity within themselves and for their fields, like David Attenborough or Michael Caine or Michael Caine, Noam Chomsky, right? People that did things late into their lives till the day they fucking drop dead, right? Vladimir Lenin, Karl Marx, George Orwell. I think Ray Bradbury's still alive. If Ray I don't know. If Ray Bradbury's dead, then he's one of the people. But we're looking at a lot of people get old. And they're still doing really important things. They have a lot of important messages. Harrison Ford, David Lynch, rest in peace. There's a lot of these characters, and I don't know if I want to be any of these gentlemen in general, but I mean, I'd like to do something that means something someday. Whether it's contributing to an already larger pool of knowledge or creating my own school of thought involving things. We were talking about methods of analyzing literature and how there's no real universalism, right? New criticism, structuralism, deconstructionism, feminism, Marxist theory, or Marxist criticism, post-colonial thought, all these things, they can be similar in ways, but they deviate. But I like universalism, right? So I wish there were more things like the chromatic scale in fields, But at the same time, thinking that way makes me a hypocrite because I don't believe that the earth revolves around the sun and the sun revolves around the earth. I think the universe kinda does move like that, but not exactly, because the sun is part of a universal axon, right? So our solar system is part of a universal axon, or a galactic. There we go, a galactic axon. So within our galaxy, we are part of an arm that spins, right? So that the sun is following whichever way the Milky Way turns, and in part, everything is moving with it, right? So all the celestial objects, yeah. And I mean, there are things I think about that, is there anything in the asteroid belt that we could, is there anything in the asteroid belt that we could inhabit? We can't inhabit Mars, so it's even more unlikely we inhabit anything in, the asteroid belt. But does the asteroid belt hold the key to a lot of our problems? Imagine we find this big thing of uranium or thorium or just something, lithium. Anything would be useful. So does space have the answers to our problems? what's in the hadal regions of the sea? What's in a lot of the parts that we haven't discovered, right? What, just a lot of questions, just starting with what or why or how. I have a lot of these questions, and they span over lots of fields. It's like, how can we tune our instruments to be more in line with the Earth, right? If Earth's or if Jupiter's magnetic sphere can be read and interpreted as sounds, or the magnetic poles they generate a frequency, then Earth's has to as well, right? Now, it could be a lot different because of geology, things like that. The mass differential, or just the extremeness of the planets, and their chemical compositions. But you know, things like that. And it's not even to be pretentious. It's like us as humans, we're not only a living species that has defied the parent Mother Nature. The Earth has been telling species what to do and what not to do for billions of years, and we get those face tattoos as species. Don't produce too much oxygen. We did, and we survived. And I don't even mean we, the prokaryotes did, right? And then after the cryogenian, different minerals get transported into the sea, and complex life develops, right? So we get things like porifera, right? Or what's the word? Fron? The charnia. The charnias are, I think the fron is a word or something like that. It's not fern because they're animals, but the multicellular organisms develop, and like things, we're told to stay in the water, where we belong, and then and a lot of it is it's just the natural evolution. But the Earth is it was a harsh place, and somehow life made it. It's something, if I think about too long, I get really emotional over for stupid reasons, right? The story of life is an epic, right? Something that could be written hundreds of pages long. Something that I could never write. I could never write the epic of life, right? But if I was given 500 years to be alive, I think at least once every 10 years I would try to write 50 pages to that epic of life. And to be able to see and understand that. And as much as I love this idea of the epic of life, it's not the life work for me, right? But that's okay, right? Someone will write the epic of life someday. Some group of people will make the will make the Iliad of life, right? To make a comparison to something that exists, to a project that exists now, I think it's called the Sagrada Familia of life. And I mean, life is that Sagrada Familia, right? We don't understand it now completely, but someday in the future we will have the technology to further understand. If humanity can persevere the second dark ages we live, that seem to be making their way now, right? With the fall of organized, diplomacy seeming on the loom, right? The fear of nuclear fallout. Could we persevere and create this odyssey of life, of something we understand? That's just a scientific standpoint. But at the same time, it's sad because humanity is going to go extinct someday, and it's going to take whatever species comes after us to have similar morphology to understand anything. And I wish there was a way to put more permanence into it. I wish we could, create these stone tablets, bury them with volcanic ash, make it super hypoxic, make it this perfect, oasis of taphonomy. Get a way to where it's not faithful, but before sometimes, or not faithful, get it to where it's not, a cataclysmic event. you know, so it's not a cataclysmic event, but get Yellowstone to be some American Vesuvius, bury some artifact, have some proof that we were here, you know, do it in any way you can, and find a way to preserve what we have, find a way to preserve what we've built. That way we can understand it, you know, over time, like Beowulf and the classics in general. I didn't write. I read something in Old Latin yesterday, and it really made me open my eyes to just how much changes within the realm of similar normality, right? The English accent, a relatively new development in the English language. And when I say the English accent, I mean the British English accent, relatively new development in terms of linguistics. There are so many differences, and in a couple hundred years' time, the difference is going to separate the two people, right? The Americans and the British are going to be completely separate linguistically, right? Or at least I would hypothesize, right? But with English as a global lingua franca, I can't be entirely certain. I can't be certain of that. But could Mandarin Chinese take over the world as a global lingua franca? Could Spanish eventually usurp? Yeah, I don't know, right? And is the differences between Spain Spanish? I mean, Catalonian is already considered a separate language, but I mean, look at the phonology differences. Not a lot of orthographic differences, but a lot of vernacular differences. Like, a lot of the colonial powers are separating from, or not separating themselves. They're being separated from communities that have split off from them. And the dialect of Spanish or Brazilian Portuguese and like Iberian Portuguese, it's like there's these differences, and we don't have enough time as just ordinary humans. Not one man can preserve everything, but we should preserve what we have as a society. So, in a way, the academicness of what I do, I don't mean academic as in it's smart, but in a scholarly setting, what I want to do, in a way, that's how that matters, right? Because it is the preservation of society that will long outlive me if I can do it and execute it well. Even if they look back on me as terra centris, I forget though. It's not terra centris, is it? Where because heliocentric is the sun is the center, right? And we revolve around the sun. I don't know what would it be like, mundocentrism or globocentralism, something like that, right? If what I contribute in my life gets compared to that, and people look at what I have to say and they laugh and be like, how could anybody think that? That's some preservation of sociocultural norms now, right? So, I mean, there is that. There's always the chance that I get looked at and people laugh at my work because it's so out of date. But I mean, I'm okay with that, right? But in terms of what it means to me, that it means shit. It means nothing, right? And I'm okay with that too. Not everything you do has to have some deep meaning, People so infatuated with considering themselves scholars in some genre, people who pretend to read literature, right? I have King Arthur, Treasure Island, and Robin Hood on my shelf, and I haven't I've read at least a quarter to half of all three books, but I don't think I've finished any of them, right? I like classics, but I mean, intrinsically, a lot of these books I have on my shelf mean way more, either from a semantic standpoint, like Fever 1793, which I read as a child, and I very much like reading still because it's simple, it's written plainly, you know, it's very easy to understand. And I mean, the yellow fever plague it interests me. You know, it takes place in Philadelphia. I'm from Pennsylvania, so it has that tied too. I have no relation to King Arthur. You know, like I'm from an Anglophonic society, so I mean that's cool. You know, so I have that relation to the Knights of the Round Table, right? But I, I don't have any relation to King Arthur outside of that, really. But I mean, historically, King Arthur would be the most important. But I mean, I guess the tale of Robin Hood is the precursor to communism, right? Precursor to Marx. So there is that. But I find a lot of these other books on my shelves a lot more interesting. I'm gonna leave the obvious ones like Commentary to Bella Gallico out of it because and Don Quixote de la Mancha because I mean one, they're not in English, so they naturally attract me. But you know, this a history of the English speaking peoples since 1900, Andrew Roberts, right? That naturally interests me, right? To Kill a Mockingbird, Pride and Prejudice, Great Expectation. Where the fuck is my great? There it is. Great Expectations. Like those are the classics I like because I don't know the whole Victorian era thing and the whole feminism thing and Great Depression. Those things they're closer in time to me than things like King Arthur, but they also so Great Expectations has a lot of really well written characters, or not really well written characters, characters that fill their niche really well. Whereas you know Robin Hood is relatively cut and dry, with very marginal amounts of twist, and the twists aren't anything to behold. Whereas Great Expectations, the twist is that the convict, right, is helping fund Pip, and Pip he doesn't appreciate this, right? And I mean Pride and Prejudice has a lot of layers to it. I'm not sure I fully understand Pride and Prejudice the way that a lot of women do. The same goes for The Handmaid's Tale, and this is in no way me saying that the books are bad, but they are definitely more geared towards women, so that adds a dynamic I don't really understand. So these books are not like niche obscure books, right? Like let's be real with ourselves. A lot of these people a lot of these books have been read by a lot of people. And then there are some books I have on here that a lot of people haven't read, but I mean they're not really beheld as, you know, prime literature examples. Like Available by Madison Perry is loaded with filthy language and, you know, modernism, and it's a story about a guy's sex life, and I love Available. It's one of the first modern books I ever bought, and I got this book, Available by Madison Perry. I got it before I was sexually active, and I read it again after I was sexually active. Okay? So, I mean, yeah. It's Available is the story of a guy's sex life, and um I connect a lot of things to it. Like there's Third Eye Blind song called Burning Man. Burning Man is mentioned in Madison Perry, and I would have never known what Burning Man was if I never if I never read Available, right? But of course the concept of Burning Man is like an actual like guy on fire, but I mean it's Third Eye Blind, so there is some allusion to drug use, but yeah. And I mean I have comic books. I love comic books. I think of all forms of written media, like written commercial media, so not things like what the fuck is this Windows security bullshit showing up on my screen? So, you know, things that aren't like academic writings, things that are intended to be read, you know, as like commercial books. So, Like The Salad Days by Douglas Fairbanks. I have that. Right. Good book. Great book. I was prompted by Mac DeMarco to get that. And then, you know, I have some books about race. You know, I have Leon's Story. I have Steal Away to Freedom. Black Card, which Black Card I got early. That is a commentary on blackness in general and how some black kids are perceived as blacker than others. And, you know, based... there's... I think it's called the Green Book. There's this quote where this, Italian guy... This Italian guy, he proclaimed himself as... My world is blacker than yours to his African American... now that this takes place in, you know, civil rights era time, right? You know, a lot of segregation and whatnot. But, because the guy that employs him, he's a piano player. He lives in an ivory tower, whereas, you know, the Irish guy, he, you know, he's pretty much being an errand guy, you know, and driving him places and whatnot, and taking care of him. He says that his life is blacker than his employers, and Black Card kind of takes the same premise, not from an Italian angle, but you know, just the role of other black communities, or not other black communities, the role of you know, perceived outlook on the world, you know. So the whole Uncle Tom thing, it doesn't really come into play in that, but the idea of an Uncle Tom and that the trickle down of an idea like that, so that a black guy could be a race traitor, right? You know, and the idea of race traitorism, and a lot of, you know, in a lot of races and a lot of time periods where people have been put in positions where they need to either give up their dignity and betray their race, quote unquote, to keep themselves alive. Like you see it a lot in the Jewish community during World War II, you know, especially among the Polish Jewish community, which, you know, horrible thing to happen to the Poles, and a horrible thing to happen to the Jews. And, you know, you see a lot of these dynamics, like it's depicted in Roman Polanski's film The Pianist, right, where the Nazis are employing Jews to keep other Jews in line. That's the thing. Those are the sorts of ideas that come up in Black Card. But even among the class disparities, or not class disparities, but among the ideological disparities between the blacks, in Black Card, they're still pitted against, you know, the white man. It's really well done. It's a great book. It's a really great book. I'd like to preface that if any of the language I use comes off as offensive, or you know, not entirely politically, or not entirely politically correct, I apologize. I am not a race theorist. I am not a race language theorist. I'm not really hip with the times and understanding how people are supposed to talk about these things, so it's not in bad nature. It's just I don't really know the vernacular to use, and yeah, when it comes to language, I don't really think about the political side, you know. The implications of vulgarity. I was texting in Spanish with a gentleman, with a friend of mine, and we were just speaking, and I said idioma, or no, lenguaje cabrón. I was supposed to put a comma after lenguaje, so I accidentally said bastard language, and he got very upset, or they got very upset with me. And, yeah, they were completely justified in their frustration at me, but those are the sorts of things I don't think about, right? Even when it comes to English. So I apologize if any of the language I use is moderately offensive. I do not mean any offense by it, but yeah. So Black Card's a great, um, it's a great book, and it kind of does remind me a lot of Fences. Fences was a screenplay too, so I think I read Fences. Fences came out in 1985, but I had been reading a lot of African American oriented literature, right? So I read something. There was a lot of race related or atrocity, American atrocity or world atrocities related readings. So like Elie Wiesel's Night. So I read that, and his wife just recently passed away. I forget her name, but may she rest in peace, and may Ellie also rest in peace. Um, but so we read that, and then there was something by Mr. Frederick Douglass, um, important American writer, one of the most important Civil War era figures, right? So of course there's two waves of America fighting racism, or not America fighting racism, because that's still ongoing, and American racism is still a problem today. But there's two waves to Americans fighting prejudice against African Americans, and so there's the Civil War era, and then there's the Jim Crow law era, and so we read that, and then we read something about Henrietta Lacks. Okay, Henrietta Lacks is one of the most important black figures in American history. She's not talked about nearly enough, and her contribution to genetics is immeasurable. And the fact that she never really got compensated, and her family's never really got compensated for, just the fact that her family never really got compensated the way that they should. They should be getting loads of money, because their contribution to genetics is insane, right? But yeah, so I had read Fences during this time, right? I read the entire screenplay. The dialogue is phenomenal. And speaking of dialogue, I don't know how the fuck Denzel Washington was able to direct. I don't know how he was able to direct and remember all that dialogue. It's really sophisticated and complicated dialogue, right? Tarantino's actors are impressive too. Like with Samuel L. Jackson remembering that entire speech that entire passage from the Bible, and you will know that my name is the Lord. Those sorts of things. But or like Willem Dafoe remembering that speech, striking down Thomas Howard, right after he bitches about Thomas Wake's cooking there. That just don't. But Denzel Washington directs the fucking movie. How? Like what? I don't know. It's such a well-made movie, and it reminds me a lot of, or Black Card reminds me a lot of Fences, and the movie was moving. I watched that shit probably 2:00 in the morning last night, and I was glued to it. I wept like a baby, like in a completely silent house. I wept like a fucking child. Probably for 10 to 20 minutes, just nonstop crying. Cause oh boy. And I praise Interstellar for this too, because it's true, but also it's important that a movie does this to not be what's the word I want to use? To not be monotonous. The movie is less about racism than it is family dynamics. Interstellar initially is more about it's more a commentary on how humanity is treating the earth. It's an environmental, and then it becomes about like the preciousness of life and fatherhood, right? But yeah, just family dynamics and how one mistake can fuck everything up, and how doing what is alleged to be right doesn't always make you righteous, right? So Denzel Washington, Troy, Troy, Troy does what's right. He works for his family, you know. He tries to be smart with his money. He talks about getting the roof tarred right and then fixing the roof. But the scars of his past and his pride and self-image get in the way of him being a truly good father, right? And the same thing happens with being a good husband. And that's when I got to thinking that none of this matters, right? Not life. It's not that life doesn't matter. It's at the end of the day, what people see is what matters, right? Not what people hear. I can tell you I speak 7 languages or 10 languages or 15 languages, and if I spoke 15 languages fluently, people would hear that. They'd be impressed to a measure, but being smart doesn't mean anything, right? Or being dumb doesn't mean anything, because as far as I'm concerned, Troy is an uneducated man, right? He's not an uneducated black man, Bono is an uneducated white man. He's an uneducated man. And while the race disparity is talked about in the movie, in the screenplay, more extensively, not in the screenplay, more extensively in the screenplay, talk more about the white man won't let you do this. Not even to Americans that know what happens in history. So they talk about Jackie Robinson in the movie. There's a lot of talk about baseball, right? And I really like baseball, so. But Americans that are versed in civics and the history of American politics know that's true, right? Bill Russell, Jackie Robinson, and even further along the line, black athletes were treated like zoo animals, something there for their entertainment, as players of a sport. Whereas, the Larry Birds and Babe Ruths were, distinguished gentlemen, especially if they came from a strong, ethnic background. Like, my favorite baseball player of all time is Ludwig Heinrich Gehrig, right? So Lou Gehrig, right? I think, the Iron Horse, okay? But he was not treated the same as Jackie Robinson. He was treated way better than Jackie Robinson. He wasn't looked at like a farm animal, and he wasn't given nearly the amount of hell, if any hell at all, for being a ball player, right? That's not true for Jackie Robinson. Jackie Robinson got hell all the time. He wasn't allowed to play at certain times, and he got a lot of shit for being a pro, back then, and he didn't do anything wrong. So, Troy's right. White man would never let that happen, right? And Troy's wife, Corey's mother, says that he has no ambition of making it big in football, just that he wants to play college ball, right? And I mean, that's a huge opportunity, but I mean, because he's so grounded in his ways, it becomes, not just a commentary on race, it also becomes a multifaceted commentary on fatherhood, because when do you loosen the leash you keep your son on? And this, I've never been fond of this, where you bring a child to this earth, and it's so ass backwards for me to think, like, you put a roof over your son's head, right? And the way I always thought of it is, if my parents ever wanted to kick me out, they can deal with the conscience of having a dead son, right? Not so much that I kill myself. It's just I wouldn't make the effort of taking care of myself, right? But the reason I say that is because I'm trying to put myself on a good path, and the same thing happens for Corey here, right? Where he you know he wants to do good for himself, but he's held back by his father. And parents oftentimes hold their children back, right? And by trying to be a good father, and by having those scars from his own father, Troy makes himself an alien to his son, right? And his sense of self, talking about himself in grand light, and you're trying to be prophetic in his speech, talking about, I done danced with the devil, or I done danced with death, right? Things like that. And continuing to speak, not speak as if everything is tail, and upon correction, laugh it off and continue to act like that. You see that Troy is really embedded in his ways. So, but to finally wrap up my thesis here, in when I die, people are gonna see if in I worked 40 hours a day, or 40 hours a day. Jesus Christ, I'm so tired. If I worked 40 hours a week, or I did whatever, I had a family, I did whatever I did, right? If I ended up like Troy, and I don't know, if I ended up like Troy and I took care of garbage, I wouldn't particularly be opposed to that myself, because those people are important. But I mean, if I went through all of college, got my 2 degrees, and my 2 majors, 2 minors, and then I went to grad school, and then I ended up doing garbage, people would see that. That's optics, right? There's not a damn thing wrong with that. But if I spend the rest of my life, doing what I'm doing now, where I'm not dodging the real world right now. I feel like that would be a misconception. But if I spend the rest of my life trying to figure out what I'm gonna do, then I'm nothing, right? I'm trash, right? I'm a stain on the societal boot, and I don't want to do that. I want to get done with college, get a job, go to grad school, and then find what I want to do, right? Retire. If college didn't work out, I'd probably do the military, right? But I mean, yeah, that's neither here nor there, right? But if I spend the rest of my life doing what I'm doing now, always building to be in a position where I can do more, instead of doing more and building at the same time, right? I mean, I quote unquote, not quote unquote, because there's nothing to quote, but I am building, right? I'm building my knowledge base. I'm reading. I'm learning languages. I'm practicing language. I'm being meticulous with my language learning. I'm keeping up with my interests. I'm making sure nothing fades. I'm I'm keeping myself healthy, relatively healthy. Leaving time for interests. I've got a good balance between work and me. Centering on me, right? So that's what I mean, I guess, is I don't want to spend I don't want to be almost 30 living with my parents, right? I ideally don't want to live with my parents past like 23, 24, right? And there's something to be said for people that do move out early. A lot of power to them, but you're stunted in a lot of ways, you know. And people are free to do that, but me, like, I, I'm tired. I'm quite frankly, I'm gonna take what opportunities I can to break the cycle that my family's in, to to put a spin, on things, you know. Not live the American dream. I don't want to be a millionaire, or I do want to be a millionaire. The fuck was that noise? I would love to wake up with like millions of dollars, right? But I don't want to not work another day in my life. I don't want to ever stop putting work into the things I care about. Even if I was a millionaire, I'd still be making music, right? Even if I was a millionaire, I'd still be learning languages. Even if I was a millionaire, I'd still be making these podcast episodes. What the fuck I'd talk about, I have no idea. Yeah, I woke up and my Roomba stopped working. Yeah, wow. That's a heartbreaking tale. I'll write a screenplay out of that. Roombas. I'll get Denzel Washington to star in it too. Or, you know, maybe get David Attenborough to narrate it. This is the Roomba. No, I don't have David Attenborough's Lexta. I think he grew up in Lexta, but yeah, because he grew up in the, like, what's the name of it? The Charnian Forest or something like that. What the Charnia are named after. But, like, he grew up in that area. I think it's Lexta. But, yeah, so there are days I don't have motivation to get out of bed. It's not me being lazy. It's just, like, what am I doing this for? But recently, I'm getting out of bed and I'm doing things, because I have so much ahead of me to think about, but also I have so much ahead of me to do, right? I don't want to be Benjamin Franklin. I don't want to be Thomas Jefferson, but I'd like to be me, right? Not to steal, not to plagiarize, but Matthew McConaughey says that his hero is him in 10 years, right? Absolutely fucking not. I'm not my own hero. Not even 10 fucking years, right? Not even 50 years. Why be my own hero? I'm not gonna live another 50 years, I'm pretty sure. Right? I'll probably get, I'll get max probably like 60, 65, right? But, yeah. So, I'm not gonna adopt that ideology, but I see myself in 10 years not where I am now, in a good way, right? From probably 14 to 19, I saw myself in 5, maybe the year, maybe thinking a year ahead at any given time in those years. I thought myself that I'd be dead, right? That's, and well, that is really morbid. I don't think that anymore. And it's not that I'm not depressed anymore, because I am. I'm in constant struggle with myself, but I you know, I've worked really fucking hard to get where I am, and I've had a lot of providence be thrown my way. To not to quote Herkenok. Erkanok. Sorry. I had to make sure I got the pronunciation right. But not to quote him necessarily, but yeah. Yeah. So I've had a lot of good providence come my way, so in 10 years, I'd like to be most of the way through grad school, or not most of the way through grad school. I guess I don't know. But, I'd like to be on the way to doctorate, to getting a doctorate in English, or translation, doctorate of philosophy and translation. But, yeah, and you know, maybe someday I will have a family, and maybe someday I can do. I don't know. Maybe someday I can be something worth being. Right? Not not me, but me, but a father. Right? Betterment of the species, not just through semantics and you know academic settings, but you know, put a good person into the world, raise them right, do what should be done because it should be done, right? Instead of being stuck, and lonely. Not that I'm lonely right now. I like my friends and everything, and I'm in a good place, but it could be more, right? That's 10 years from now, but this doesn't. People aren't gonna see this, and people aren't gonna see this and particularly care. So that's okay. Right, that's perfectly fine. But as it stands, you have this. You're gonna keep having. People are gonna be getting music out of me for a long ass time. I'll never stop having ideas. I'll probably stop having good. I don't even know if I've had any good ideas. I can't even. I can't lie. Right. Right. And you're never gonna get me to stop talking about language things on here. All right. You're never gonna get me to stop airing opinions out. Right. But don't let that be catch-all be-all. Don't let me influence any of your thinking. If you think something I say is stupid, that's perfectly fine. I'm sure if I listen to my own, if I listen to myself talk, I'll think I'm stupid. You know, that's fine. Actually, thinking about it now, I probably sound really stupid right now. I do actually, as a matter of fact. But yeah, I really like these. I'm really happy with this episode, even though I had to pause a lot because I'm all stuffed up and shit and whatnot. But thanks for tuning in. Yeah, I'll keep you guys updated with Romanian, other language stuff. But thank you for listening. I'm Evan. Peace, love, take care, toodaloo, auf Wiedersehen.